Welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join me today for this virtual webinar. We're going to spend the next half hour on some strategies, lessons, and different techniques that you can use immediately following the session to assist you in teaching math. I'm really excited to share what I have planned for today, and I hope for you to try some of these out with the students. I like to begin webinars by kind of gauging my audience and their interests, so I'm going to run a quick poll this webinar is intended for K-12, but this poll will really help me better understand more or less who's on here and who's watching today. There we go. Let's launch this poll. All right, so everybody should be able to see that poll right now. Make sure to take the time to fill it out. All right, so it looks like majority here. Let me close the poll. I'm going to actually share just so you can kind of have everybody idea. So you can kind of see the poll that we have, majority of them being middle school and elementary, and that's okay. We have some high school and pre-K, nobody in the other category, and that's okay. But it's good to kind of have that idea as we're kind of working through this and be able to kind of tailor instruction for them as well. So let's jump into our agenda for today. So I like to have a goal or goals with my sessions. It really starts with the agenda. I also have a sense of humor too, so there might be some shared images and graphics to keep this presentation lighthearted. That's typical of me. And so to kind of begin, we're going to kind of talk about STEM and math. I think this is a great starting point, and it's very relevant to what we do in every day in and outside the classroom. My intent is to kind of touch on this topic and really set a foundation to what math is all about. Then we're going to jump into some lessons and resources you can use and or share with others. While I go through some of these, feel free to share some of your own activities or ask questions along the way. And then we also will be transitioning into some teaching strategies and methods that you can use or think about incorporating when you teach math. And then of course, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. We do only have a half hour today, and it's going to go by rather quickly. So that's okay. And if there's something here that you feel like you missed or anything, I'll have my contact information at the end as well, so we can follow up too. So I believe everyone, or at least most of you, have heard of the acronym STEM or know what it stands for, but I also like to use STEAM and then include the arts. But regardless of what you have heard or what you use, I mainly want to focus on the math part. I want to reiterate the importance, because oftentimes when this acronym is used, the focus is mainly on science, the technology lab, or in an outside the classroom education program. Sure, you know, math certainly plays an important role in all of the calculations, but it usually feels like math is something of an afterthought, maybe just fulfilling the acronym. And this is not to say that math concepts aren't being shared, explored, or imparted to students in a manner that holds meaning and relevance. It is introduced and often utilized in hands-on relevant ways that help students see some of where math fits in the world. But again, this is mostly happening as an adjunct to science and engineering. So if STEM or STEAM done right should be an educational experience that creates space for students to ask questions relevant to them as they experiment, test theories, consider a range of outcomes, and choose to ask, how could I, how would I, why should I? And a key component of that is math. So I kind of have another poll I want you to kind of take, and you can answer based on what you think. There's no right or wrong answer here. It's just more or less what you kind of believe. And so I'm going to launch this right now. And the question is, which area is the most important in the acronym of STEM or STEAM? Okay, so unfortunately, you can't only choose one answer. And I know this is a math webinar, but don't feel like you have to answer one way or another. I want you to kind of answer based on what you think, not what you're feeling or what your gut is telling you. Okay, so we're going to kind of wait for others to kind of participate right now, just to see if they can answer here or get more votes in. And the reason I really wanted to take this poll is because this will lead me into my next point. Math is a language, all right? And so It looks like majority of the people have actually voted here, which is great. So I'm going to actually close the poll and I'm going to share some people's answers. So I'm currently sharing. So majority of people feel that technology is the most important, followed by math, followed by science, followed by engineering. Nobody for art or STEAM, and that's okay. Um, and so I really wanted to kind of share that just because I think it's important to kind of have that. And also, again, drive my point that math isn't just a subject, it's a language. All right. And if I were in person, I would have loved to work with you through like an exercise and discuss this. But if you really think about it, math is truly a language. It's a system of communication with vocabulary, grammar, syntax, and it's universal. The symbols and organization to form equations are the same in every country. Math helps explain real world phenomena, those abstract concepts. And if you're really following me on this path, this will help explain my final point that math is the language of science. Now, this sometimes is a hard concept for people to grasp because we were taught usually early on in our lives that science and math are different. If you're teaching math, you teach math, not science. But yet you have probably heard those that, do well in math usually do well in science. And there's a reason for that. It's because math and science tie very closely to one another. Math literally explains it communicates all the science around us. Think about it. Gravity is explained mathematically. The periodic table of elements can be explained mathematically. Our theories and laws of science are tested using data, using formulas, and a series of repeatable experiments. Science could not exist without math, and the sooner we teach students this, the sooner they can begin to appreciate the subject, appreciate the opportunity to understand human traits, puberty, our ecosystems, etc., which can all be explained with genetics, again, tied to mathematics. When there's a lot of emphasis on math at the elementary level, this is also the beginning of their understanding of science. And there's this natural connection between the two. This is a crucial part to really incorporate math into STEM or STEAM program. And I purposely wanted you to take that poll to kind of choose one answer because I want to force you to think about what do you find most important? Maybe you have a bias, maybe you don't, but it's important to remember that students will also come with these biases and these misconceptions. And as educators, we really need to understand them and know how to help students learn and reflect on them. So we can see a connection between science and math. You could probably see where there's an easy connection between engineering and technology, but all of these components together essentially lead to real world applications. It's about understanding the world around us. And when students learn about science, technology, engineering, and art and mathematics, we're also teaching lifelong skills like critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity. When you see a home, you know that there was some thought and planning around the design, the siding, the doors, the windows, the whole makeup. When you see art, there's this creativity, but you also receive expression and emotions when viewing something for the first time. When you see technology and use it day to day, it's easy to forget how much effort and thought went into that piece of technology. And you might just say, okay, Jordan, I get this. You're preaching to the choir. But what I'm really trying to hit home here is that students don't understand this. We sometimes forget learning a new skill for the first time and how much patience it takes to fully grasp a new concept. We sometimes forget to share or tell those closest to us how we really feel. Math and science is all around us, and we sometimes forget to point out the quote unquote obvious examples right in front of us. Math is a powerful subject. It is powerful. We really have to be that guide to help students with a strong foundation. And STEM or STEAM, essentially, it ties what we learn in the classroom to real world applications. What we see every day is a combination of these different areas. So now we're going to switch kind of gears a little bit and start to jump into different lessons and activities you can use for math. But you're going to notice a common theme among them. They all incorporate some sort of STEM, STEAM application. And I'm sure some of you might be familiar with the STEM or STEAM, but each of these lessons incorporate the engineer design process. And this might not have another name at your school, like the engineer design cycle, or there might be different steps, similar or different than what you see on the screen. But essentially, it's a process in which we solve problems, small or large, right? And so This should hold true to any math problems you do in class. More often than not, a student is going to ask, hey, Mr. Nelson, why are we learning this today? Or why do I need to know that? Or my first response is to say, you know what, thank you for asking, because I want them to know that it's okay to question what we learn. They have that right to take ownership in their learning. And of course, you'll have some students that ask just to ask. They don't really care. But if you show your passion and you're legitimately explaining the why, it'll start to um, it will start to get students to really continue inquiring about what they're learning and to continue ask questions. But it also shows how relevant everything is to everyday life. Those difficult physics questions that seem so abstract but relate to a rocket ship going to space and re-entering the atmosphere have everything to do with science, technology, engineering, and art and mathematics. Understanding the why allows students to appreciate and empower students in their learning. I'll give an example of using the engineer design process. So, for example, buying a home for this first time, and you're a first time owner, and that was something new to me, and I'm more or less recent to that. But you go into a home and you're like, well, you know what? I don't really like the colors inside my home. I really want to repaint my home. So the first thing is you're going to identify what the problem is going to be solved. Well, the first problem is I want to paint inside of my home, right? Then you're going to have to do some research, whether it's investigating, doing some planning around, okay, what is already out there that could help? Am I painting the kitchen? Am I painting the bathroom? Am I painting the living room? The different kinds of paints I'm going to need are going to be dependent on the room I want to paint, right? And so then we can start coming up with a plan and come up with an action of saying, okay, if I want to paint this room, how much paint do I actually need? I have to actually have square footage, and that's going to have a cost to it. So if I don't have a lot of money, I have to be really careful about the type of paint I use and then also how much I use. So I really want to be cognizant of that. And then you have the opportunity to actually create a prototype. And well, in this case, you don't create a prototype, right? You're going to actually paint the walls. So you actually paint the walls and actually see how it works out. You're going to test it out. But then usually 9 times out of 10, you're like, wait a minute, that paint is gross, or it doesn't really work well with the color schemes I'm trying to do. The light in there makes it look different than it really was. Those little square swatches that you get for paint colors didn't really match up to what I really wanted. So you get frustrated, right? But there's an opportunity to improve. And then you might start off at the very beginning. So what is your problem now? Well, now I have to repaint the wall. Well, I have to let the paint dry. I might have to, recoat it. There's all these different things that you might have to do. And this engineer design process follows suits with everyday life, just like you saw with my painting example. Same thing with the student might experience with the first time that maybe in their own room, they want to repaint their room or they want to do something different with that, right? And so taking the opportunity to go through that same design process that they learn at school can be applied at other places in life too. And so then the last piece that it comes down to is the educator, the teacher in the room, to have the patience, the experience to know that there might be some discomfort in trying something new because we don't know the outcome before we begin. And you might be trying different teaching strategies that you've not done in the past, and this is okay, but you have to be thinking about the bigger picture. So if you're a math teacher trying to incorporate STEM or STEAM, or if your school is trying to incorporate a STEM STEAM program, it starts with the foundation at the elementary level. And you can certainly argue that it starts even earlier in the pre-K level. But when you incorporate STEM or STEAM, it has to scaffold. Everybody at your school should have the same mission, vision, and values in order to make this program successful. And then ultimately, we want students to be able to take the skills and knowledge that they've learned and apply this to the real world. My passion has always been about helping others. And this is what really kind of drew me to education to begin with, seeing how everything ties together. And it's really all about the authentic learning, the why. Why are we learning algebra? Well, why are we learning chemistry? Why are we learning reading and writing? If you can answer those questions for students, it's very, very impactful. All right, so the first activity is called Be Cool with Popsicle Engineering. And this is from a website that I've visited for, and you can see that on the screen in case you want access to it afterwards, or I can provide the link as well. But essentially, the students are introduced to science and engineering concepts by reflecting and answering questions such as, what is a scientist? What is an engineer? And go on to compare and contrast the two by talking about different roles they play in the world. So for example, maybe the best way to think about a scientist is to really think of someone who wants to know more about our world. They perform, experiments in the lab or in the outdoor world in order to gain knowledge. On the other hand, engineers are people who invent, design, build, and test lots of different machines or structures. And sometimes I like to do like kind of further other understanding about these careers in like a little exercise. And I think I want to kind of do this exercise with you as well. So, and this is something too that you can do with younger or older students as well. So the first thing I want you to do, because I can't see you, I can't physically see you at all, is I want you to close your eyes and then imagine or picture a scientist. Okay. So I want you to close your eyes and just imagine or picture a scientist. I want you to really see what they look like, their face, what they're wearing, the color of their hair, every detail that you can imagine. All right. Now I want you to open your eyes, and I'm going to run a poll to see what you saw. All right, so I launched a poll that says, did you see a man, a woman, or a person? And I want you to be honest. Be honest. When you close your eyes and when you pictured this person, did you see a man, a woman, or a person? Just really quickly, just answer that poll for me just to see. After you close your eyes, you envisioned a scientist. Did you see a man, a woman, or a person? All right, and most of the people are starting to vote now. Again, and this is a great exercise, like I said, it could be good for older or younger students. And it looks like we're starting to get a little bit of a mix here, which is good, which is really good. All right, so I'm going to close and I'm going to share it. So, and we actually have a little bit more of a split, which is great. I think that's awesome. And I think that with a lot of students, and oftentimes when I'm teaching in front of like outside of education, or sometimes not with all teachers, or sometimes even with teachers, there's usually a misconception that a scientist is seen as a male figure. And you could certainly change the question to a mathematician or a teacher, et cetera, to see what kind of results you get. And that will clue you into how the students perceive the world around them. And you can start to addressing gender biases that you don't even realize that is in your classroom, even at the early years or the later years. And then students are introduced to the engineer design process and explore through a set of guided instructions. So going back to this lesson, we're going to get them first introduced to learning about scientists and engineers. Then we're going to actually talk about getting into the engineer design process. If you're looking for a resource, I've kind of added a video link there too for you to be able to see. We don't have time necessarily to go through that video, but for you, we want you to be able to access that to talk about, okay, what is an engineer? And then you can use this as a follow-up with like a KWL chart. And then the next step from there is to actually use the talk about measurement and using a variety of stations. So, but of course, you want to first model and teach students how to document in their journals. They're going to be using journals throughout these measurement activities. So station one could be, set up with like rice, measuring cups, and spoons. Students can predict and practice with measurement conversions and experiment filling up various cups of rice. Station two can be set up with water, measuring cups and spoons. Students will predict and practice with measurement conversions, experiment following up with various cups of water. You can modify it by having food coloring in the water cups or encouraging students to try adding one drop at a time to see what happens. Maybe another station is at a computer and measurement games. I have a variety of different links I can send, but they could be games with like Sesame Street or for different kindergartens, or it could be through different programs like PBS Kids, things of that nature. Then maybe station four is like a magnifying glass or microscope with various materials on slides, or like sugar, salt, Kool-Aid powder. And students can draw in their journals their observations. You can have other additional supplemental resources like, hey, Rosie Revere engineer book, talk about personal protection equipment, things of that nature. So I just noticed that someone can't hear anything now. I just want to make sure everybody can hear. Are we okay with the audience and being able to hear? Just want to make sure audio, looks like my audio is working. Okay, so anyways, going back, and we can use this as a class module, right? And so the next step from there is taking it to the Jello challenge, all right? And so give your students Jello with no directions. You can gather all the materials to make the Jello, but essentially we don't want to give them directions because we want them to go through the engineer design process of actually coming up with of how do we actually make Jello when we have no directions. Now with kindergartens or early learners, you obviously are going to have to model them with the engineer design process, how you would go through that process of making Jello. With older students, you can actually jump right in, have them go through the engineer design process, document how they're going to actually create this Jello first before they actually participate in this activity. All right. Then from there, we're going to actually jump into, oh, there's the gender biasy template that I was going to talk about. So this is just a template that I'm going to provide as well afterwards too. So let's jump into the second challenge. The second challenge part of that activity is talking about the real world application. So I'm going to read this scenario. The next, oh, the full screen is frozen on the scientist poll results. I apologize by that. I did close the results. Is everybody else seeing the polls by chance? I think I've closed everything. I did stop sharing them, so I don't think we should be there. But I do want to continue so I get through everything here today. So the scenario that we do this challenge is, today you're going to become a popsicle engineer. A local popsicle business has an order for a set of purple popsicles, but there's a problem. They have the powder to make red popsicles. The owners have come to you to figure out how to make the popsicles purple with the ingredients they have available. They also need you to figure out how many popsicles to make and how to make them all the same size. Today, you'll begin working in teams to fulfill the popsicle order. The materials are ready available, what you can see on the screen. And so those are materials that you can utilize. And you'll work in teams for as long as it takes to successfully complete the popsicle challenge. At the end of each work section, you will be able the chance to share your findings with your classmates and learn from each other. So we really want to kind of highlight what is the main points of this challenge. So there's a really great example showing and progressing through the challenge. We want to make sure the batch of popsicles are for the whole class, that that they are red, and when we need to make them purple, and then there also has to be the same size for everyone in the classroom. So there's a lot of different things that we have to kind of address in this challenge. And it's a great example of showing progressing through a challenge that is not only meaningful, but exciting and different from a traditional math problem. Measurement and experimentation is key here, and students follow the engineer design process to ask, imagine, plan, create, improve, share. And this activity can be scaled up or down depending on the level of your students. At the higher grade levels, conversions might be a factor, or give them ingredients with fractions or decimals. You could allow students with more freedom with the variables, different colored Kool-Aid or food coloring, volume, design, materials available, etc. So with the different possibilities, this could be like a 4-hour unit or a multi-session unit across a week. It's kind of up to you. Just a really good activity to utilize. The next activity is about creating a safe bungee cord for washi. And so you can see a little picture there. They have like a little washi, like a washer or a weight there. But students essentially learn about roles that engineers and mathematicians play in developing the quote unquote perfect bungee cord length by simulating experiment with the bungee jumping using washers and rubber bands. They act as engineers for like a hypothetical amusement park and are challenged to develop a bungee jumping ride that is safe. So students find the maximum length of the bungee cord that permits the jumpers of using the weight to get as close as the ground as possible without going splat, right? We want it to be safe. So students work in teams to collect and plot displacement data and calculate the slope, linear equation of the line of best fit, and spring constant using Hooke's law. And then the students make hypotheses, interpret scatter plots, looking for correlations, and consider possible sources of error. So there's just a lot there, but it's really easy to set up, and it's easier than you think. But again, has great connections, great world application. I'll show you a quick video of that. Actually, no, we only have 3 minutes left. Unfortunately, I can't show a quick video. But essentially, I really wanted to talk about the materials needed. You need a washer, of course, rubber bands. There's a large paper that you can see in that image, masking tape, calculator, maybe to organize the materials, paper, pencil. And again, you will have a recording of this, so don't feel like if I'm rushing through some of this, you'll still have access to this as well. But let me read you kind of like the full scenario so you kind of get a better idea of what the students are hearing. Izzy and Sam are starting to become engineers and interning at a local theme park called Crazy Town. The executives at Crazy Town want Izzy and Sam to develop a show-stopping bungee jump ride that is safe. So at this point, we want to stop and reflect about, okay, what do students see? What are they thinking about? What are they wondering about the story currently? Then we could continue with the story. One issue that Izzy and Sam are concerned with is the impact of the bungee cord length on the distance of the jumper's fall. Again, we would pause and have discussion about, okay, the impact of the bungee cord length and the distance of the jumper's fall. How does this really relate to force, right? And really document that, have a discussion as a class. And then you can finish the story afterwards and say, okay, today the executives want you to predict and measure the distance that a jumper will fall for different bungee jumps. Remember, your bosses want this ride to be thrilling and safe. Your task is to find the maximum length of the bungee cord that permits the jumpers to get as close to the ground as possible without going splat, of course, being safe. You will record your data, use this information to find the total force acting on the bungee cord. Then you will use the equation we call Hooke's law to calculate the spring constant. You will also use scatter plots and linear equations to predict the maximum length of a bungee cord for a safe fall and return. So let's talk about this. Obviously, you're going to need some prior knowledge, the activity, and there's pre and post quizzes along with a worksheet that I'm going to give at the end, but I'll make sure to attach those too, so don't worry that if you feel like you didn't get them. I also listed highlights of the challenge too, for you can see them. We want to, determine the maximum length of bungee cord to get the closest possible, determine the total force, use Hooke's law to calculate your spring constant. So we want to know the spring's elastic limit is, which is like the rubber band. So when we reference a spring, we're discussing the rubber band with the students. Once the spring limit is reached, the spring becomes permanently distorted and no longer, quote unquote, springs back. Just like on a bungee jump, the people go up and down until they don't move anymore. When they sit there, that distance from where they jumped to where they are just resting at the bottom is the spring limit. We want to make sure that if this doesn't make sense, let me know, but I wanted to make sure to clarify that just as an explanation of that. All right. The next thing I'm going to get into really quickly is the teaching strategies. And I'm going to go a little bit over, but I'm hoping that you find this webinar insightful, that you can stay with me throughout this. The first strategy I want to kind of jump into is the slow graph reveal. This is a great teaching strategy that you can use with students that you may or may not have done and used in the past, but it can be rewarding to use with your students. And I have an example of one there on the screen. You can view it and start to make notes about it. But essentially, when you lead this activity, you want students to first not say anything and just think about, okay, what do you notice? What do you wonder about this image or graph? You can give about maybe 10 to 20 seconds before you answer, allow anyone to answer, to really allow students to formulate their thoughts, and for those students that normally don't speak up, to have that opportunity to think and build kind of a confidence before they speak up as well. So does anybody have initial comments about this image that they see on the screen? Maybe things that they notice, maybe things that they see or kind of wonder about the image? And you can write this in the comments or the questions tab. Kind of a great way to start thinking about, introducing patterns, shapes, colors, factors, etc. And I actually have also a link to how students are actually utilize this with a teacher. So I have that link there that you can actually see an actual teacher work through this strategy with students before. But you're going to notice some interesting things about this. You're going to notice, like the number 4, for instance, it's split into 2, but it's completely orange. So if you look at the number 2, if you multiply 2 times 2, Notice that equals 4, as if there's two numbers to equal 4, but they're both orange. Same thing about 6 here. Notice half green, half orange. Well, 3 times 2 is 6, but you notice that 2 is orange and 3 is green. And if you notice some other patterns for other different numbers, you can see like this pattern starting to emerge. And then you can start to test theories like, okay, well, what would number 62 look like? Or what would number 74 look like? And get their students to really start to think about this different graph that they're actually utilizing. Again, they get in a little bit more detail at that link there, but I just wanted to kind of introduce this as kind of a segue into slow graph reveal. Another graph reveal I wanted to share with you is it can also be used to discuss around other topics and subjects or relevant news. Looking at this graph on the screen, what can you tell me about it? Take your time, look at it closely, see what you can kind of discern. Um, you know, it's you might see things like, hey, there's 3 variables, or hey, there are functions, there are different colors. You know, maybe the scale for the millions is by 500,000s, and for years is decades. Maybe the range is 0 to 2.5 million. The average rate of change for the red graph from 1920 to 2010 is positive. Things like that that you just might notice, okay? And an Algebra 2 teacher actually used this graph with their students, and it took about a total of about 10 minutes to discuss. He used it as an introduction before his lesson, but I'm going to want to actually reveal this to you now with the actual labels there. And his students actually thought it related to, economic situations or population, but after he revealed the labels, there was kind of like this shock. The students didn't realize the circumstances behind the data necessarily, but it allowed the teacher to really kind of discuss the prison system, what the racial breakdown is currently, making deeper connections between social issues and math. And normally a teacher wouldn't directly tie this, to Algebra 2 curriculum and discuss it with students, but the teacher admitted it allowed for important discussion around social injustice and empowering students through math, even if the discussion isn't wrapped up in a quote unquote problem or directly tied to what they were studying. Okay. So slow graph reveals can be used for smaller and bit-sized ways comparable to maybe problems that you might encounter on a state exam. You can look for those opportunities to allow students to interpret data, make sense of what they see, and make some observations based on what is given to them. The more they're given this opportunity, the more they can apply these skills to the stock market or, other applications in life. And so And if you're going to start off doing this now, try to do something that you're interested in first. It's all about your comfort level in your discussion. It could be a graph about animals, plants, your school statistics, things that you might have insight to and can be prepared to discuss with your students. Then you can gradually ask a student for their interest and have them come to class with an example. I'm sure that statistics right now on average time spent watching a screen, whether a TV, handheld device, phone, etc., has gone up significantly in this past year. This kind of data would be great to show, and it's directly tied to what students are dealing with currently. Then you can tie it to how they're feeling about school now versus before. So, I mean, the ideas are endless, but the strategy remains the same. Then the second teaching strategy I want to kind of discuss is making mistakes and embracing them. Now, this may seem like a teaching method, but it's oftentimes very difficult, especially the older students get to get out of this quote unquote shell. How many times at a meeting you hear crickets or sometimes after you ask a question, how many times does it feel like you have to kind of pull teeth just to get an answer from your students? It lives in all of us, and it's hard to accept the fact that making a mistake by saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing is going to make us look or feel inadequate. I've fumbled on words during this presentation or other different presentations that I've done, especially to large groups. I've been in front of a class of students teaching and the lesson just flopped. It just did not go well. We've all been there and we experienced it at some time or another. No one likes being the odd duck out, and it really comes to almost our natural instincts when we didn't have all the luxuries we have now, the shelter, the food, and a convenience store, fresh water, all those essential things that we sometimes take for granted. If we were not in a group, that could mean life or death. We are creatures of habit, and we have kind of made, to be social. Making mistakes can make us feel isolated and insecure about our own self-worth. Our natural instinct to avoid social exclusion is usually accentuated in school, where most questions have right or wrong answers, and we're praised on achievement rather than the effort. The cost of mistake in this kind of environment often overrides any potential benefits of suggesting a solution. And of course, this leads to the familiar scenario of a teacher's questions being met with some sounds of crickets, or as students sit glued on their chairs in terrified silence, or stay muted with any no video, or not discussing in any of the chat boxes, right? So most students want to be flawless from the start, or at least not make a fool of themselves. Even to parents, failing feels scary, right? The higher the stakes, the more courage is required. So adults too often refrain from learning or trying things new. So what are some strategies to use to combat this? Let's kind of dissect this a little bit and kind of look at a couple few of these. One thing you can do to combat this is to give students the opportunity to make many, many mistakes, probably exactly 1,000, right? For example, a foreign language teacher sometimes gives their students a bag of 1,000 beads. Every time a mistake happens, like talking to someone else in a language, that they take out a bead. When the bag is empty, the students basically are considered to achieve level 1 mastery, right? The faster they make those mistakes, the faster the students progress and process that information. Now, this method can be also bring to light who is and isn't making mistakes. Have students record and send you privately, what they've lost for the week. This can be a real eye opener. Now, does this mean we can just keep making mistakes over and over and over again? No, no. We want them to kind of learn through the process, and you can see the difference. To make effortless progress on what matters, educators should encourage these learning sized mistakes. This doesn't mean giving kids permission to consistently do poor quality work. It's simply letting go of the absurd pressure to always do everything perfectly and right, and that can sometimes be a challenge, especially with a student we haven't really made a good connection with, or if our patience is really thin from having a bad day already. It's the same idea with grades, right? What does a grade really mean? Does it really matter that we always get an A? Well, if you get an A and you just memorize things and you forget it later, are you really truly understanding that? Or you're just memorizing the content? So that's the real idea behind grades too, and there's huge conflicts behind that as well. The other thing is, failure leads to great achievement. Instead of shaming your kid for, maybe hitting their serve into a net during volleyball, celebrate the fact that she's even on the court to begin with. Instead of, maybe belittling a student for even the tiniest of errors, be proud of the fact that they're unlikely to make that mistake ever again. There will be moments where your students feel like they're on shaky ground with some meaningful challenge that they've taken on, and kind of talk them through with how you would talk to someone just learning to walk. You've taken the first step. You may feel wobbly, but you've just begun. Now you're going to get there, you know? So great ways to kind of help us grow. Other things that you can utilize to basically help out with making mistakes is, I'm the first person to tell you that I am not the best at arts and crafts, but mistake trees might be a thing that you might try out. I'm okay with the fact that I'm not the best at art, but this kind of activity might help you gain a healthier perspective on embracing mistakes. So take some colored paper, scissors, and glue, maybe some glitter, and create some trees with branches. Label the trunk with this so-called mistake from your past. Maybe the time you really embarrassed yourself that maybe you can feel appropriate to share. You lost your wallet, or you slipped and fell on your butt, but you didn't get injured, etc. Then the branches are all the effects of that mistake. Let's go with something like you peed the bed, right? An effect that might be that because you peed the bed, you change your pants in the morning and you drink less water in the morning. Then take that step back and look at how you not only survived that mistake, but most likely it wasn't that big of a deal after all. We work through those things. Writing those things down individually can make us grow. Awesome sauce flaws. If you're not in the mood for crafting, maybe get some paper out and get ready to, write some good old-fashioned words about your mistakes. Write down as many personal flaws as you can think of. They can be brutal, that's fine, that's okay, but this exercise is going to have an happy ending. After you jot down your flaws, Like maybe it's frizzy hair, you're overweight, always late. You're going to put positive spin on each and every one. Frizzy hair, well, at least it's not oily. You spend your time on things besides your looks. It gives you, lots of fun options for Halloween. You kind of get the idea. I'm not saying you should just accept all your flaws, but I'm saying that your flaws are here right now. So you might as well not let them ruin your whole situation. It's about perspective. The next time you see someone make a mistake, I don't want you to ignore it. We have, become a culture of averting eyes. We think, okay, we're doing people a favor by pretending we didn't see that or, see each other screw up. But we all mess up. We're only human, and that's a big part of the game, right? So let's start to acknowledge it, accepting it for what it is. The next time you see someone trip, I want you to see it. Don't be a jerk, but acknowledge and connect. I've tripped there too, dumb sidewalk. Are you okay? Use people's mistakes as an opportunity to embrace each other's humanity and connect. Everyone makes mistakes. When we truly accept that, we start to take some power away from others. Admit that you make mistakes and try to get a healthier perspective on them. Yes, I messed up. No, that doesn't mean anything about me as a person. No, I'm not any less deserving of being truly seen, heard, valued, and appreciated. Kindness project. So this really has to do everything with just being kind. So you might have a special person during that week or that day of the week that basically what you do is you get a piece of paper and everybody in the classroom writes down one great thing about that or something very special about that person, basically saying what they really like, can share, and then at the very end, they read out loud this about that person. And it's always positive. Oftentimes students get so overwhelmed by the fact that, oh my gosh, I didn't realize you thought I was pretty, or oh my gosh, I didn't realize you liked my sense of humor, or you noticed that thing about me. It's a great boost of self-esteem, but it also projects that sense of kindness that we should be kind to others. So that's another thing that maybe you want to incorporate within your classroom. Also, videos could be essential work and can really help support students mathematically and in developing a strong mathematical identity. And videos are 100 times more intense, right? Like everybody like sees an embarrassing video, you're like, oh my gosh, that can go viral on TikTok or YouTube or whatever else, right? But if you've ever had a chance to record a class, you can really notice the dynamics you may have missed in the moment. You can really pay close attention to the mathematical ideas, the questions you ask. Then you can rewatch again with a different focus. Videos force you to step outside of those generic instinctual feelings we all have after a lesson. That went well, or no, that didn't went well. The same thing goes with my webinars. I record these and I say, you know what? That didn't really go well based on what I thought. But when I look at the survey and I look at who's attending, how many people attend, that's going to give me an indication is, hey, is what I'm sharing worthwhile or not? Is that worthwhile for educators? So that is very impactful right there. Okay, so our instincts are, kind of there to kind of direct the product of our biases. What that class that had me, glowing with teachers high really as productive as I thought. What good things happened in that rough lesson that last period? Sometimes we need a break free from our intuition. We might even need to reprogram how we think about what happens during class. So of course we want students to develop strong mathematical understandings and fluencies, but it is also important that they develop agency and identity within mathematics. In spite of fatigue from pandemic teaching, try to continuously strive to find ways to counteract the biases that students encounter on a daily basis. So again, I thank you for sharing with me. I'm about 15 minutes over, but my name is Jordan Nelson, and I'm one of the customer engagement managers with Nasco. If you have questions, you can ask them at this time. As you're writing them, I'll start to kind of get the handouts uploaded on the webinar control panel. Let me start doing that right now, so then you can actually have some access to that. And again, you can ask questions during this time. Feel free. I'm here available to answer. And I know I didn't get the chance to cover everything as in depth as I wanted, but I really wanted you to be able to see a little bit of everything in this half hour. And so I kind of give a little bit framework of everything instead of just one thing. If you liked it, great. If you didn't like it, let me know, and I can see if I can adjust my presentation the next time, so I can maybe focus more on the activities or more focus on the teacher strategies, things of that nature. I really want you to kind of give me that feedback to kind of help you where I can. All right. And I even gave you an example of a slow graph reveal if you want to be able to do that. I gave you some documents for the popsicle engineer, the bungee cord presentation as well. And then I also have a, just another way to be able to help you address just the everyday life things. I think it'd be good to kind of see, ever heard the phrase name it, claim it, stop it? That is another good way to kind of help out with mistakes, without bullying, about feeling ashamed, of things of that nature. So I kind of attached that as well. I didn't get into depth about that, but that's definitely relevant to mistakes too. So again, I just uploaded all the different handouts. There's 5 of those different handouts that you have. If you are watching a recorded version of this, please reach out to me at engage@nascoeducation.com, and I'll get you those documents from this recording. Also be aware that you will be receiving a recorded video from this webinar. So in a follow-up message, if you're like, hey, I don't remember that web link, I can pause on one of those different screens shares, and then I can actually get that web link too. It should come about 1 to 2 hours after the webinar. If you did like this webinar, you can certainly go to nascoeducate.com, listed on there. That's our resource center. That is also where we house all of our other webinars. You can create a free account and sign up, and then also see the calendar of upcoming webinars too as well. I'm going to look at the questions tab right now. I just kind of want to make sure that I can see if there's any kind of questions. I appreciate everybody for coming. I definitely thank you for those that participated in the polls, for participating on the slow graph reliefs. And I definitely appreciate your time. I know we stayed a little bit longer. I hope you enjoyed the session. Maybe next time you wanted to go a little bit shorter, and I'll plan accordingly. But I'm one for over planning usually. It's just more or less the teacher in me that I just want to maximize as much things as I can. The name it resource isn't working. Okay, thanks for letting me know, Kathy. What I'll do then is I will follow up in a message and send that out to everybody. Just in case if everybody else is struggling with that too, that's okay. I'll make sure to follow up with everybody. But I really, really hope everybody enjoyed this. They got some value out of this. If not, let me know, and I'll definitely focus on more areas too, or other areas as needed too. So I don't think I see any other questions. But with that said, thank you for attending. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this, and hopefully I'll see you at next webinar. Take care, everybody.